Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome and here tonight we are taking a break from baseball. That has been what the month of October has been about. Not just because we've kind of run out of baseball content, but because my co-host this week probably knows absolutely nothing about baseball. Ben Phillips is back, and we are going to be discussing the top 20 Disney movies of all time. Really, this is our combined list. You can go back and check out our previous two specials where we've discussed the first 43 Disney theatrically released movies. We've gone to some very weird places in terms of package films from World War II, great disagreements on our previous episode. As always, leave a 4 or 5 star review on Apple and Spotify. If you are watching or listening on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and like this video. Ben, I'm sorry we're not talking about baseball. I know you were very much looking forward to learning about this game.
I know some about baseball. It's I mean I think I don't like we in the UK we play rounders, which isn't baseball, but I think is like similar to baseball.
It is, and we are sending teams to play baseball games there, just like we're sending NFL teams to play our version of football there too.
Yeah, but people go to the NFL games in the UK. I don't know anyone who's gone to see a baseball game in the UK. But I guess baseball's also probably like culturally more like cricket in terms of it's a slower game. It's more of a full day event. Although I guess most American sports apart from basketball are like you go for a full day because there's a lot of stopping and starting and there's a lot of other bits and pieces, which is definitely like more of the cricket vibe.
Yeah, speaking of stopping and starting, let us start by talking about our top 20 Disney movies of all time. And all I could say, Ben, is from this point forward, once we kept past number 20, we are talking about not only some of the best Disney movies of all time, but some of literally the greatest animated movies of all time, maybe the best movies of all time as well. And of course, I'm just going to mention this right here at the top because, of course, we will be talking about The Lion King at some point on this list. But James Earl Jones did unfortunately pass away, and it just feels like with this being the 30th anniversary of The Lion King, the Mufasa prequel sequel coming out later this year, it's kind of fitting in a way, just because I mean his voice and what he's done as Mufasa, as Darth Vader, being in Field of Dreams, what an unbelievable legacy he has left.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Ben, let's get to it.
So I have to pose a question to you, Jerome. Why are you so sexist?
Why am I so sexist? Yeah, I just want to point out that Frozen was in my top 5, so I am not sexist.
But you don't include this female empowerment classic Mulan at our number 20 in your, I mean, barely in your top 40. You think that there are 24, only 23 worse Disney movies than Mulan.
I mean, I think part of it is the animation style of the late 90s always is just not something I'm a fan of, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't dig Lilo and Stitch as much as you do. I mean, this is your Disney time. This is when I was kind of getting away from Disney. So this feels like it's much more up your alley. I'd be very curious to know like what the mean is for this movie, because I feel like with you being a few years younger, I feel like this is much more like your movie than it is mine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6 years old when this one comes out. I definitely remember seeing this one in the cinema. I mean, this one is just like hugely fun. It's probably one of the more subversive of the Disney movies in that there's like lots of fun kind of like feminist kind of queer reads that you can place onto this movie. The fact that like the Li Shang falls in love with a woman who is like cross-dressing and like seems to be open to admitting the feelings of falling in love with who he thinks is a man is like a really interesting subtextual wrinkle to Mulan that I think a lot of like millennial Gen Z people have definitely picked up on. I just think this is like a really solid movie. The songs all rock. It's a less grating Eddie Murphy performance than Donkey is in Shrek. It's obviously like it's a far better diversity style movie than Pocahontas is, even with the kind of like the relative lack of Asian creative people involved in the actual stuff of it. But I think that, like, Mulan is a far easier story to adapt in a way that is not kind of voyeuristic in the way that Pocahontas is as a story and whatnot. But it's got action, it's got comedy, it's got romance. It's kind of like it's the last time that Disney really is able to synthesize all of these different things into one really cohesive movie. And then from this point onwards, I don't think any of them really are. Like, you move away from stuff like a clear villain, definitely move away from like romance at the center of a lot of these things, where it almost feels like they're not. It's not romance. It's like they're best pals, and maybe there'll be like a hint of like a kiss or something. But yeah, I think this movie rocks. "I'll Make a Man Out of You" is like probably a top 5 Disney song of all time. In all honesty, and I know you'll probably disagree with that take, but yeah, Mulan, it rules.
I don't hate this movie. Like, that's the thing. It's like Pocahontas. I hate that movie with a passion. This is just a movie that I like. I think it's fine. I'm just not as super into it. And I don't want to crap on it because like we're talking about the top 20 here, so I don't really want to say too much negative. But all I'm going to say is this is the only live action movie that I prefer to the animated one. That will be my hot take before we go on to the next movie on the list.
That's an insane take, and I wish we had time to unpack that, especially considering how hated that Mulan movie is by some places on the internet because of how beloved the animated version of this movie. But speaking of one movie that mostly manages to avoid falling into racist traps, to one movie that most definitely does not avoid falling into racist traps, we are of course talking about the Aristocats, not the Aristocrats. It's a very different movie.
Boy, is it a different movie. All I'm gonna say is, how dare we go from Mulan and transition into talking about the Aristocats? That feels racist.
Sure does. I mean, this one is one of those ones where this Aristocats is like really, really charming, but you have to do a lot of legwork to kind of like get in front of like why it's so charming. Like, really, the movie does itself no favors with how much outdated content is in there nowadays.
It's kind of weird, like because you watch this and you watch something like 101 Dalmatians, which both are kind of made in like within 10 years of each other, and 101 Dalmatians is not at all falling into some of the traps that this movie is. It's kind of amazing just how dated the Aristocats actually is, but like it's still a fun movie at the same time. I don't know. It's really weird that this movie somehow ended up in our top 20, even though it is not actually in either of our top 20 individual lists.
It's also a funny one because I think it's like the first full length theatrical Disney movie that is an original concept.
That might be why. I mean, again, I think this is I think the plot of the movie is fun. I like the voiceover performances. I mean, you're talking about like this era. I think you're just getting really solid performances, and you're not relying on like celebrities to do the voice.
No, this is like an all-star cast of like so many of the Phil Harris, who's obviously probably best known for like so many of the voices. I mean, obviously he's Baloo in Jungle Book, he's Little John in Robin Hood. Eva Gabor obviously does The Rescuers kind of like 7 years after this. It's this fantastic, like it's this wonderful mix of like, obviously it's set in Paris, but you have the oddity of like American accents and all these other different bits and pieces to it. It's got a great villain. It's really well drawn in terms of actually feeling some peril. Like, there are moments in this movie where like you can't believe they're doing what they're doing in terms of like threatening to throw cats into the river. Fantastic music, fantastic songs, even when they're really racist.
I mean, that's the thing, is like the Siamese, again, it is racist, but the song is kind of good.
Yes. the song rules. I mean, obviously it's Wolfgang Reitherman, who is like the king of these Disney movies. Like, he directed basically every movie in the 60s, will continue to be working on the movies through The Rescuers, has such a distinct style, is basically like the creative head of these movies for basically 20 years. And like, whilst I think I think everyone's got like ones that they like better than this one. I think this one is it's kind of like that top middle where like people might dislike another movie more, but because this one ticks enough boxes but doesn't piss off people in certain ways, it kind of gets that pass, which is why you end up with that weird stat of like you had it at 22, I had it at 24, so therefore by transitive properties it like gets into number 19 on our list.
Well, this is a movie that definitely would probably get canceled today if it was made today. Speaking of canceled, let's talk about the next movie on our list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure no one now regrets. Okay, right, but you will understand what this movie is in a second. But there is something deeply, deeply funny about Chicken Run coming out in the year 2000, with Mel Gibson voicing the lead male character of that movie. And then in 2023, we can't have Mel Gibson come back to voice our lead character. Who are we going to get? Someone so much less problematic and controversial, Zachary Levi. Oh shit. Zachary Levi, no, stop. Stop. What are you doing?
I mean, Zachary Levi really putting himself out there, first endorsing RFK Jr., who's a lunatic, and then just being like, "Yeah, I'm gonna endorse Trump," and I'm just begging to be canceled at this point. This After Shazam sequel was a complete bomb, and he's probably gonna get tossed out of the DCEU. It's absolutely hilarious. Hilarious.
But what about Harold and the Purple Crayon, the hit movie of the
Oh
summer that
my
we all went to
god.
go see?
Oh, oh, that movie was. I mean, it just again another movie that looked terrible.
Let's get back to simpler times. Number 18 is, of course, Tangled, in which Zachary Levi voices the male lead. He is still Chuck at this point, or has Chuck ended around now?
It's around. I mean, because Chuck was always in perpetual danger of being canceled. I mean, this is why people love people love Zachary Levi because like he was on this little show that could. He was very charming in Chuck, and then he does this very cute like big comeback movie for Disney. Like, man, he just had it all, and he blew it all up.
I mean, I remember when he guested on a podcast that I used to listen to, and like he was so enthusiastic, but obviously also completely oblivious to what the actual like content of the podcast was, and was just like butting in and kind of like weaponizing his fame at that point. It's truly a really fascinating career, and like for years I asked questions of like, boy, what would it have been like to have Adam Baldwin on your set all the time? How do you have a conversation with that man, especially like when politics are coming up, like the 2008 and the 2012 election are probably like around the time of Chuck, and then Zachary Levi has kind of gone like, oh no, I understand now why you were able to spend 5 years around.
I want to know how Matthew Modine and Adam Baldwin got along on the set of Full Metal Jacket. That would have been really interesting.
I'm sure it wasn't, but enough about Chuck. We need to actually talk about Tangled, which is
a really good movie. Like
it's a really that's like this to me is the movie that like put Disney back on the rails after a dreadful 2000s. And there is another movie slightly higher up that actually came out just before this, but the other thing that it does is basically prove that they can do 3D animation in a way that is going to be sustainable. Like Bolt kind of hinted around some of that stuff, but like when you look at like what Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons were doing, Tangled is obviously it's back to basics. We're going back to do a really famous fairy tale that we've not done to this point. We're going back to music. We're going back to just all these different things. Like they actually have a fucking villain, which is so refreshing, like in this point onwards. And obviously because we are that kind of 2-3 years before Frozen at this point, when Frozen completely changes what the structure of a Disney fairy tale movie is. But Tangled is so much a throwback to that Renaissance era movie, whilst also being modern, whilst also actually being a well done kind of CG animated film.
I mean, this is the kind of movie it feels like you make in response to Shrek in so many ways because it is a fairy tale, and I think you could have gone in a lot of directions with it, but they took the Disney route, and I think they really played to their strengths, and I think that's the difference between this and Meet the Robinsons and Chicken Little is that they're actually playing to their strengths with the romance and some really good. All joking aside, I mean Zachary Levi is a great person to cast in this role. Mandy Moore is probably even better at this point. You have those two really good anchored voice performances. The animation still holds up really well, even 15 years later. Yeah, this movie is just a lot of fun, and it's really easy to see how this made it into our top 20. Just because I feel like this is the prototype of what Disney should still be doing to this day, and this is what I hope that they can get back to at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as well to think that, like, I think uh, both Zachary Levi and Mandy Moore like reprised their role in like 3 years of a TV show, like almost a decade later. Like they obviously did like playing these characters, and Disney kept on pushing these characters in a way that's far less intrusive than the Frozen pushes have been. Like they kind of did the thing that they did in the 90s where it's like, we're just going to do 3 seasons of a TV show. We're not going to do a half-hour short, then stick it before Pixar movies. We're not going to do like rush a sequel into development. Like the Tangled gets to stand on its own, and we'll just make content surrounding it that can appeal just to exclusively to like children or people who, if they want to dig in, can find more content for it. And I mean, you have the fact that Alan Menken is back to do a Disney fairy tale for the first time since Aladdin. I mean, I know he did like Pocahontas and Hunchback of Notre Dame, but they're not fairy tales. Like this to me, this is like the first time that they've kind of got the gang back together to do this kind of story, and it's kind of shocking that really from this point onwards they haven't done that again. Like Frozen is almost it, but Frozen completely changes the game of what this kind of movie is forever.
Yeah, it really does, and we'll get to that very shortly. But up next is another movie I feel like that is in your age range, but I like this one a lot more than you do.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So 17, Hunchback of Notre Dame, I literally just mentioned it. Hunchback of Notre Dame is a movie which is like some of the highest highs of Disney movies, and also has like it's it's directed by Gary Truesdell and Kirk Wise, who were the directors on Beauty and the Beast and Atlantis: The Lost Empire. So obviously they're coming off of probably one of the biggest hits in Disney history at this point. And to me, Hunchback and Aladdin are kind of not Aladdin. Hunchback and Hunchback and Hercules are two sides of the same coin in terms of at this point Disney is trying to inject so much more modern humor, and some of that is most likely kind of the input on oh god, who's the guy who left the Katzenberg kind of influence that is being overwhelmingly kind of like pushed through at this point, where it's like we need celebrities, we need pop culture references that the kids are going to understand, and it the kind of the balance of a Disney movie is kind of getting out of whack. Where I still like Hercules, I still like Hunchback of Notre Dame an awful lot, but it's harder for the more creative and the voices that are not pushing the merchandising and stuff to break through. But that's not to say that Hunchback doesn't have it, and I'm sure you're going to talk about those moments of like creativity that like are bubbling under the surface of this movie.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny you mentioned the celebrity thing because that is definitely a factor when you look at the list. But I think this has one of the better villain performances of any Disney movie, and I think that's one of the reasons it's higher on my list than you. I think Tony Jay as Judge Claude. I mean, I think that is one of the best villain performances that has ever been in a Disney movie, and I think that says a lot. And the fact that it's like he is a voiceover actor who's been in a ton of things, but he's not like a quote unquote celebrity. I just think it works out so well. I'm a huge fan of that performance, and yeah, I mean, I could kind of take or leave some of the other ones, but I still really like this movie. It's weird, like I went the longest time without actually seeing it, so I did not see this when it was in theaters in 1996. I saw it like maybe 5 years ago for the first time, and I recall that I just remember really liking it. I like the animation in this movie; it feels very classical. It is certainly not perfect. I would agree with you. There are definitely some cringe moments of pop culture, but this still feels like it still feels very much of the Renaissance era, and I still think it's capturing some of that magic a lot better than Pocahontas one did.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as you say, Tony J, Just Frollo are like incredible. Like I think if the movie was more the Frollo stuff, it would be like 4.5 stars. Like the probably one of the best movies that they did of that decade. I mean, there's no question that Hellfire is an insane song to be in a Disney movie. Like Hellfire is
Yes. Oh man.
absolutely incredible. This movie of like burgeoning kind of like sexual repression and religious fanaticism is truly like it. That again, like if I'm doing a list of 10 Disney songs that are like define them as a company, like I have to put Hellfire on there of just like how the hell does this song get into this movie that also features Jason Alexander as like a maybe imaginary friend, doing like pop culture references and fart jokes and whatnot. Like, and that to me is that like dichotomy at work in Hunchback of Notre Dame, where the adult side of it, if you're not making this movie, or at least you're still making this movie aimed at kids, but you're cutting all the stuff that you've obviously just injected into it to appeal to children in 1996, I think this is far more of a classic. And I think something like Mulan, to bring us back to that, is getting that. There's less pop culture references in Mulan than there are in this, and it makes it kind of moors movies like Hunchback and Hercules to this particular era, and that becomes more jarring the more time has been since they've come out.
Fair enough. I mean, Jason Alexander is what happens when Robin Williams is such a big hit in Aladdin. I mean, we can't ignore just how important that was for better and for worse. Like Robin Williams is incredible in Aladdin, but I also think it taught Disney the wrong lessons about casting and the kinds of characters that are actually in these movies. So that's why you get Danny DeVito, which I think was more successful than Jason Alexander in Hugo, but you're definitely going to get that kind of casting in a lot of these movies. I mean, it's Eddie Murphy as the dragon in Mulan. It's other things too.
Yeah, it's Katzenberg. Katzenberg cannot be underestimated for his influence over the casting decisions of these 90s movies, and then the fact when he goes off to go form DreamWorks, like obviously they have the they have those few years of doing kind of like more adult dramas with kind of famous actors in them, but Shrek truly is him getting to prove that his idea behind like Aladdin is a way to make money.
Yeah, I
In the
mean
long term.
that is his. I mean, in terms of like success, that is his defining success. His defining failure, of course, is Quibi, but we don't talk about Quibi.
But moving on from Hunchback of Notre Dame to the most recent movie, I believe, in our top 20, a movie which has a truly fascinating release story. We will, of course, be talking Encanto at number 16, which is your number 19 and my number 21. So basically, like, we're right kind of in line on what this movie is. But yeah, this movie bombed when they released it in cinemas. And then it truly had a second life on Disney Plus, and is probably the defining reason why Disney was so reticent to actually keep giving their animated movies theatrical releases, and probably shot themselves in the foot until they finally learnt their lesson with Inside Out 2, I'd say.
I would say so. I mean, Encanto, it is such a weird story, just because I think that Encanto, I think it's really good, but I think it suffers from the Disney problem lately, which is no villains and no romance, and I think it really hurts this movie a lot because you do have "We Don't Talk About Bruno," like that has become the iconic song, which kind of surprised me. I'm surprised that that is a song that really stuck with people and kind of grabbed people nation. But I think it's really colorful. I think it's got a great story. But again, it feels like there's something missing from this movie. And I think that's part of why it was unsuccessful. And again, I'm the person that actually did see this in theaters and I really like the movie and it's in our top 20 for a reason. But again, it just feels like there's something missing from this movie to truly make it something defining. And I think this is a movie that could absolutely have been in the top 10 under different circumstances. Like if there was that defining villain performance, or if there was a romantic element brought back into it. Like again, I think that's been a huge issue with a lot of Disney movies. And I get that not every Disney movie should have that, but when you are unwilling to do either of those things, it really starts to show. And then you end up with something like Encanto, which it feels incomplete.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the thing with this movie is I think there's so much to really like about it and the way it tells its story about family, but it does feel like it's like, oh, you're like a full step away from like really something kind of like the claim to be the best Disney movie of like the last 20-25 years or something. And I mean, it's funny you say that like you didn't expect We Don't Talk About Bruno to become the major song, because obviously Disney didn't either. Because if you remember the Academy Awards from that year, the song that they get nominated for best song at the Oscars was Dos Oruguitas, and so they had to go out of their way to perform We Don't Talk About Bruno because it was having such that cultural moment at the same time. But I also feel like Disney often will put up like the slow kind of like emotional ballad instead of like the fun out there kind of like big celebratory song. Um, but I mean, obviously, people loved Surface Pressure. They loved the Family Madrigal. The performance in this thing's all rock. It's still in that window where we probably haven't quite fully exhausted how much we want to see Lin-Manuel Miranda in culture. Like again, like the fun of the diversity stuff. It's doing all of these correct things, but then it keeps on kind of shying away from maybe like the more complicated story where like everyone has to be like shades of gray or everyone has to be correct in some fashion to prevent people going home with um I don't know if their attempts to be more complicated almost instead of just having like a black and white villain kind of rob them of like a simplicity to their structure that would benefit their movies a lot better.
I mean, to me, I think the grandma should have been the villain, straight
Yes.
out. I think that would have made for a much better movie. And I think her reasons for leaving the country can be good, but I think I think you could have presented the idea that the older generation kind of messes things up sometimes. And you have to not only do better, but you just have to be better than them. And I would have just made the grandma a straight up villain.
Yeah, I mean, is that obviously generational trauma, et cetera, et cetera? It's a thing that a lot of things are dabbling in, but again, it's going out of its way to excuse the emotional trauma inflicted by these old generations because they're trying to avoid certain things without examining that they're causing. Again, it's nice that we're having these conversations about a Disney movie, but you're right, it doesn't make this like a great movie. It just makes it like a really good movie.
I think so. And I think, what's also interesting about Encanto is that in this movie, both parents are alive, which is unique for a Disney movie as well, because the tradition is that either the mom or dad die or they're both dead. So I think this is the kind of movie where, like, with the parents both being alive, like, that's something that is worth exploring. And maybe having the grandma be the villain makes the fact that the parents are both there all the more impactful.
Yeah. But moving on, number 15, we have The Princess and the Frog, and we really probably have to start this conversation with Jerome. Why do Disney movies like turning their black leads into animals?
I mean, why do we need to talk about what happens in Soul as well?
That's the thing. Like, it's the fact that it happens multiple times where Disney will go like, right, and we're finally having an African American lead of our movie. Here we go. Oops, sorry, no, they're a frog or a cat or whatever for the bulk of the runtime. Or I guess Soul, like, it splits it between he is a tiny little soul thing and a cat.
So what you're saying is that it's problematic to have a white woman be in the body of a black person in the movie Soul. Is that what you're telling me? We get to talk about this next year because we're going to do Pixar next year.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that conversation because I don't think we got enough time to unpack Soul at this point in time.
No, we
But
don't.
The Princess and the Frog is a movie which I really, really like because it feels like the true end of an era. I know Winnie the Pooh kind of comes out about 2 years later, but Princess and the Frog is obviously it's the last time that Musker and Clements got to work with 2D animation. It's the last 2D animated um, Disney fairy tale that they get to do. Obviously, it's a little bit more diverse than previous ones. We actually get to shake it up, and Randy Newman's going to come in and do the songs for this one after being kind of like Pixar's guy for so long, and the songs rule in this movie. It's I just find this movie so fun. The songs are so good. Again, it's kind of like the last beating heart of like Disney having proper villains in their movies, and Keith David is fantastic as Facilier.
Oh my God, Keith David is so good. I mean, one of our best voiceover actors. Period.
Yes. And but the thing is, obviously, ultimately, you come back to it, and it's like, but we're gonna make our two black leads be frogs for most of the movie. We'll have like weird moments where like Jim Cummings is voicing a Cajun Firefly, and we're gonna like milk his death, but not really for like 5 minutes of the movie. I don't like. I do think the positives outweigh the negatives on this one. I think this is a true all the animators at Disney trying to prove that we can make 2D animation work, and the fact that it kind of doesn't. And this is it. This is the end of the line for that
It
style
really
of movie.
sucks that this movie bombed, because I think we actually need to go back and we need to bring 2D back. Flat out, that is something I came to realize after watching all of these movies, as I really want to see 2D animation make a comeback. And I'm not talking about the goofy, like Nickelodeon style. I'm talking about this, where you like, this to me feels like a classical Disney movie. It doesn't feel like it was made in the aughts. It feels like it is really going back to that classical period where there's not as many pop culture references, but it definitely feels like it jazzes up, pun intended in this case. Like, it really jazzes up what Disney movies could be. And I really like the story. I mean, again, there are those problematic elements, but it is just an absolute shame to me that this movie did not do that well, and it pretty much doomed 2D animation, because I think people have gone back and really like this movie. And I think if this movie came out this Thanksgiving, I feel like it would do much better than it did 15 years ago, because I think this would be so much more refreshing because it's 2D.
The thing is, would it do better than Moana 2?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's weird because and people have brought this up. Like, you look at like Captain Marvel, Aquaman, and Joker all did $1 billion for their first movies, and then all their sequels suffered. And obviously that is superheroes, but do people have an appetite for Moana 2? I will be very curious to see, because I did not expect. I mean, Inside Out 2 was a massive success, like just unbelievably successful, even more so than the first one. No matter how straight they tried to make Riley seem, I guess it didn't matter. But I don't know. I will be very curious, because I have no idea at this point. Like, there is a world where I could see Moana making $1 billion, or I could see it like flopping.
That's the thing is, we ended last year and it was like, boy, Disney are in dire straits. What the hell are they going to do this year when you look at their slate? And now we're at a point where it's like Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2. They've still got Moana 2 and Mufasa, which are sequels to movies that did huge box office. But like earlier on in the year, you would have said, like, oh, but is there any appetite for them? And I'm like, they could have $4 billion movies released in one calendar year.
Yeah, they could. And yet it still feels like they're on fumes.
Yes, that's like none of the movies they're making are exciting. Even Inside Out 2, which I think is like better than it has any right to be, but still not.
I think you liked it more than I did.
Yes, but still it's still worse than the original movie. Deadpool and Wolverine is obviously, like, there are people out there that love it. Like, I watched a clip from that movie the other day of like 2 people reacting to one of the cameos, and I was like, I'm so happy that you're enjoying this, but to me this feels so cynical. And
I mean, it does. I mean, it definitely. The more I get away from that movie, the less I like it. Even though there are some moments of some of those cameos that I liked, I definitely agree. I see the sentiment out there, but just like Disney, we are completely ignoring The Princess and the Frog.
I mean, Disney and Frog, lovely movie. Again, Musker and Clements, are probably pound for pound the two best Disney directors that we've ever had. We've got more movies from them coming up further on the list. So like, we're not done talking about Musker and Clements, who I think are like the kind of people that I wish Disney was able to train more up of. And obviously they do have guys working in the modern world of working on like countless movies. I mean, obviously we're gonna get to like Chris Buck in a minute and whatnot. But yeah, Prince of the Frog, really, really good movie. And again, is this kind of like this return to fairy tale movies that concludes with Frozen, and really they haven't actually gone back to since Frozen came out, which is really interesting. I mean, I guess
They kind
Moana.
of tried to do it with Wish,
I mean,
but not really.
Moana is also it. Like, it is based on like a historical myth. She is a princess in some fashion. But yeah, as Wish is an original story and is supposed to be calling back to 100 years and 62 movies of history.
Yeah, Princess and the Frog, just really fun. But let's go way back.
Way back to, I mean, like one of the definitive Disney movies at this point. I mean, I think if you had to do 5 movies from before the release of Little Mermaid, this probably would make a lot of people's lists, I have to assume. It is, of course, The Jungle Book.
The iconic Phil Harris performance, Bare Necessities, might be an all-time Disney song. I mean, what else? What else can you say about this movie? I think is it perfect? No. Is it? Does it still have problematic elements? Yes, it does. But I just think again, you're talking about that classical animation style. You're talking about the classic voices that you're used to hearing. Again, Phil Harris's voice just equals comfort for me, and that's why I mean, just him in this movie, him in Robin Hood, like he has always stood out as being one of Disney's best voiceover performers, and I mean, he has such a smooth voice. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, there is something as well. I mean, obviously, I mean, infamously, I guess, is the last movie that Walt Disney had any involvement in. He dies in the middle of production of this movie, and there is like a real kind of before and after Jungle Book quality to it, where like after Jungle Book, you can feel Disney are like lost in the wilderness for quite a while before they manage to get their way back with the Renaissance. But like the run of movies they have afterwards feel like a company trying to figure out an identity in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's because Walt was coming in with like specific ideas on what to adapt, or he just that. I mean, not to deify him as like some kind of like innate genius, because obviously he was obsessed with so many different things like the parks and whatnot. But like it really does. There's just a different feel to like that list of like Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone, Jungle Book, to then go Aristocats, Robin Hood, Rescuers, Fox and the Hound. Like it just there's a completely different feel to that before and after list.
They're also kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, like running out of fairy tales. I guess that might be part of the issue. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something to be said for having somebody in charge who is a creative voice as opposed to an accountant. I think that makes a huge difference as well. Like whatever criticisms, and there are legitimate criticisms of Walt Disney as a person, but I mean, and he was definitely like a capitalist, but he was also very much somebody who seemed to want to put good movies out there and focused on being a creative as well. So I think that also has a lot to do with it. When you have somebody in charge who is invested in the creative, I think that makes a difference too. And once he leaves, like you lose that because then it's just like who is actually running the show, who's running the studio. Like I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's to say, like Jungle Book again, it's adapting Rudyard Kipling, who, oh boy, are there things that you can say about Rudyard Kipling in terms of his opinions. But yeah, I mean, like this is the definitive version of a like fairly iconic story that has been told countless times. One of the stories that is it's in the public domain. Anyone can do a version of the Jungle Book at this point if they want.
So you're saying, what about Mowgli? What about Mowgli then?
I've not seen Mowgli. I have no opinions on the movie Mowgli, but it is very funny that Jon Favreau and Andy Serkis were like competing for years to try and get their definitive takes on the Jungle Book out in a world in which the Jungle Book, the movie, this one already exists. I mean, probably the most definitive thing that this thing has to add to the culture is King Louis, who is not a character in the original Jungle Book.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's spectacular. I mean, this movie is so spectacular. I think it does a great job of just existing in a world where like the culture is very much changing. But I mean, this movie is still able to capture a lot of that Disney magic, and I mean, it's in my top 20 for a reason. And again, it is one of the definitive Disney movies that I think trying to remake it is just it's a fool's errand. It just is.
So I mean, this is one of those interesting ones as well, where like obviously these Disney movies, um, they have songs, like they are like putting songs in there and all the rest of it. But there's probably only two from Jungle Book that are like full blown musical numbers. Like there's a lot of kind of like spoken word. We're going to transition into like a little bit of a song, but it's still going to be part of the plot. Whereas like Bare Necessities and I Want to Be Like You are like full on blown out like musical sequences in this movie. Which one do you prefer?
I mean, I think my answer is Bare Necessities, but I mean, I Want to Be Like You is also really good too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you get Louis Prima to do this movie is to
Yeah,
have him kind of like go absolutely fucking wild on that song.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just. I mean, both songs are again when you're talking about the Disney canon of songs. I mean, that's it right there.
Yeah, like those two immediate ones. What do you think of? Because obviously the voice of Mowgli is Wolfgang Reitman's son, but he was basically like the child actor in the Disney movies because he's also Christopher Robin as well at the same time.
I think he's fine. Like, I don't think he's bad, but are you not a fan?
No, I mean I just think it's interesting nepo baby conversation to have. Like when you think of that list of people who are in multiple Disney movies, like Phil Harris is obviously one of those. Sterling Holloway is another one in like that long list of like boy. Even when they have more or less the same voice, they still like are imbuing the character with like a different energy. Like Baloo and Thomas O'Malley do not feel the same. Winnie the Pooh and Car don't feel the same.
I
But
mean, I think
Mowgli and Christopher Robin are the same person
like
functionally.
just imagine. I mean, kid actor. It's tough being a kid actor, and I could see a world where if you're the director of this movie and you have a kid who is in this age range, and maybe it's just, I mean, it would probably be easier to direct them for sure, and you might be able to get a better performance, as good of a performance out of them as you would a regular child actor. So I definitely see the logic. I think, I mean, the nepo baby conversation is always one that is worth having, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it doesn't really bother me that much because, I mean, like the kid is not really the point. Like the movie is about him, but the point is not about him too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like he is a vessel to move us from fun characters to different fun characters and whatnot. Like Mowgli is not supposed to have a personality. Mowgli is supposed to get us
Right.
from Baloo to Bagheera to King Louie to Shere Khan.
And I mean, I think that's why the director cast his kid. I mean, that probably just makes it easier because again, you could probably just direct them a lot better than somebody who you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, what's next on the list? Next on the list is we're going even further back to very, very early on. This is the fourth Disney movie ever made. We're talking Dumbo, 1941. Did you ever think you'd see an elephant fly, Jerome?
I don't know. I did see one fly in a Tim Burton version of this movie, which is also a classic. Let me tell you, that 50 minutes of extra Dumbo is what I needed.
I like Tim Burton Dumbo. I think that is not as good as original Dumbo, but I think it is probably in my like top five
This is a
live
wild. This is a
live
wild
action
thing.
remakes because
Wild.
I do like the additional stuff he adds because it's Tim Burton basically going, boy, isn't it really fucking weird that I keep doing Disney movies?
I love the fact that he turned Tandy Newton's child into a STEM baby,
Yeah.
both a STEM baby and a nepo baby.
But Michael Keaton plays Walt Disney in that movie, and I think that is really
I mean,
there's interesting.
he's definitely the best part of that movie.
There is fun stuff going on in Dumbo. I will defend it. But it's
how is the animated version more depressing than the Tim Burton one? Like this movie is profoundly depressing.
But also the fact that this movie is 64 minutes long. This movie is like, we are getting in and out. We're going to show you a flying elephant. We're going to show you some pink elephants. And then we're going to
show you some racist crows.
Yeah, some racist crows. We'll do like one song of like some black people working on the railway line. They fit a lot into this movie. I mean, obviously this is another one of those, like, I feel like a lot of people revisit the first 5 Disney movies, which I think are like all great movies, and they're kind of like, what more is this? I'm like, you have to understand, this is being made in the middle, like, the World War has broken out at this point, and Disney is producing these timeless pieces of animation. Like, this is at a stage where, like, Citizen Kane hasn't come out when Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs come out at that point. Movies that are still being watched and are still so firmly crafted, and just the amount of effort that must have gone into a sequence like Pink Elephants on Parade or whatnot. Like, truly. And yeah, like, I think there is a level of mastery to these first like 5 movies, and I think, is this the lowest that we've got any of them on, or do we yeah, Fantasia's still coming, Snow White's still coming. Like, yeah, this is our lowest ranked of the first 5, but like, man, these 5 rule.
I would say so. It's remarkable to me to think about like the fact that Pixar and Disney have like these writing teams, and they are like by committee putting these things together. And I have no doubt that there were committees that were also like, anytime you're in animation, you're just in a more collaborative environment. But I mean, it just feels like these movies are so simple, but they're so well done. Like, because it seems like the focus is on the quality of the animation, the focus is on the characters, and it's not on the plot. And I think that's why these movies work, is because you just get to do these wild shenanigans. Like, you get to have a scene with the pink elephants. Like, in a modern movie, that is something that probably, like, if you're making Dumbo from scratch, like Tim Burton version, where you're like trying to both do an homage to the animated movie but also do something different, like, that's the kind of thing that probably gets cut. But this is a movie that I just think is really well executed. And again, Dumbo is it's a really sad movie until like the very end. But I think that's part of why I think it has so much appeal. And that's the thing about Disney movies, is I think people always, when they attach nostalgia to these movies, they always forget how profoundly disturbing and depressing some of these early ones can be. And we'll talk about it more with these future early ones. But I mean, Dumbo is a really good example of it. I don't know that there's anything as distinctive as the mom being shot or Pinocchio with donkey ears, but there's some of it in this movie.
There's an inherent like trust of children to be able to deal with these more traumatic elements that is definitely gone. Like, you get to like 1943 comes around, and then they kind of like are stuck in this rut until Cinderella comes out in 1950, and then from 1950 onwards, so much more of that darkness has been like tamped down. Like, they're like, when it finally does come back, like, you've reached the 80s and you're at Fox and the Hound and Black Cauldron, but there are like 30 years of Disney movies which are so much more child friendly, or at least so much less distressing than these first 5 Disney movies, which have elements of horror and elements of like profound sadness that definitely go.
I mean, maybe that's the difference between living in a depression era world versus a post-war world.
Oh yeah, I mean, there is definitely a study to be made on the transition that Disney makes between like from 37 to 43 to like 50 to 80, which more intelligent people than us should probably do. But like, the fact that we can pick up on it is definitely like, there's something there. There's something there on a cultural level. Like, can you see the changing economic mood of a country based on the quality and the content of Disney animated movies?
So what you're saying is, with this conversation, we have to let it go?
Yes, number 12. Frozen, the movie which is simultaneously the best example of modern Disney and is also the thing that like probably killed them as an animation studio, being able to make interesting and I don't want to say transgressive, but like work that are pushing the boundary of what you can do with animation.
See,
Um,
the issue for me, for I think that people have with Frozen also is that there are millions of parents streaming music services were just like coming to the forefront around this time as well. So people got their fill of Let It Go, and I think that's also another reason for the backlash.
oh yeah, Let It Go is like a generation of parents' bane of their existence. Like, imagine having like a child aged between like 4 and 8 in 2012, 2013. You'd be like, oh my god.
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember I was working like on a film radio show around when Frozen came out, and like the chief reviewer went off to go see it, and like he came back and said like, yeah, it's all right. I mean, like the songs are probably going to do quite well. And I don't think we realized just how fundamentally Let It Go and this movie were going to change the culture. Like this is the I think has completely changed. Like obviously we can say the Renaissance is the era with kind of like the one of the longest tails of quality movies, but Frozen is at this point potentially like the definitive Disney movie, like inarguably probably the most successful one realistically in terms of
I mean, we have
merchandising. And
we have a Frozen 2, we have a Frozen 3 and 4. I mean, think about all the merchandise. Think about just how profoundly it's changed the some of the actors' lives. Just think about not just the money, but I mean, just so much attached to this movie. And I definitely like this more than you, but I will acknowledge that it has certainly created some problems for Disney as well because it feels like this was both the beginning of something and the end of something. And I think there's something to be said for creating a great sister relationship, but I think the issue becomes is that what do you do from there? Like how do you continue to evolve? And it just feels like Disney has devolved and just gotten away from doing romance at all. And I mean, you get a little bit in Frozen and Frozen 2, but you don't really get a lot. And Frozen 2 doesn't really have a villain, which I think kind of works. But again, it just feels like all of the other Disney movies have kind of followed that particular formula. And what else? What else can be said? I mean, this was a really successful movie. I think it will go down as one of the definitive Disney movies for all time, and maybe it is the one. I don't know. I mean, for me, this is top 5. For you, this is top 20. But I think for some people, like this would be their definitive Disney movie, and there's probably some people who would have it even higher on the list, maybe a
yeah,
number 1 or 2.
I think we need to wait. We're probably not that far away from it, but I do think there is a generation of kids are going to be turning 18 like very soon, most likely, where this was like the Disney movie for them. Like you think like we're 11 years post this movie. If you were 4, you're like 15 at this point, and I think like when those kids level up into adulthood, there's going to be like a marked shift in some of these Disney conversations. I mean, I one of my favorite, not favorite, but like one of the things Disney will graduate a princess into the Disney princess branding. Like all of the Disney princesses are under a generic Disney princess branding, which exists in your Wreck-It Ralph 2s and whatnot.
Yes.
Frozen has not graduated. Frozen is the only like Anna is, I guess, the only Disney princess who is not classified as a Disney princess. She still exists under the Frozen branding. Like that is its own unique, bespoke thing that exists outside of everything else. Obviously, the issue with that is you probably want Elsa to be your Disney princess, not Anna, but she's the queen.
And
The
they're going to
queen
give.
of
They're also. I am going to call it right now. In Frozen 3, Elsa is getting a boyfriend because they don't want to have those conversations
well,
anymore.
that's the ultimate thing is like it's the thing that handicaps this thing where it's like, boy, this movie is probably like a 4.5 stars if it's like the movie where Disney are confident enough to make it a little bit gay. um Especially when you look at the people who were in this movie and stuff like that, and the amount, like, I mean, having Jonathan Groff and the chasest romance between him and Anna, which is just so frustrating. And obviously, there are moments in Frozen 2 where they kind of like hint at like, I don't know. They keep on getting these subversive jokes in there, but they can't quite get the like we're gonna make Anna Gay. We're going to give her a girlfriend, and we're not going to have like a proper villain. Even though I think like Hans is like one step closer than they've done at any point afterwards, but it's still
I think the Hans twist is one of the smartest things they ever did. I think that was actually a really good thing.
yes. I mean, Hans is good. I mean, obviously you get Alan Tudyk starts his run in Disney movies as this one with
Boy,
no,
no,
sorry, no, sorry, he started in Wreck-It Ralph, but this is the time where he starts as like he's going to be in every movie as like a fun little side character, as opposed to like top 3 to 4 build character in the movie.
Yeah, for better or for worse, I would say.
Yes, but yeah, Frozen rules. The songs are good. Like all of the choices,
real scorching hot takes here. Scorching.
the the decisions it makes are smart, but they're not smart to become the template of your company,
Correct.
or of your like.
This movie should have been treated as an outlier as opposed to something you build around.
Yes, and then Frozen 2 is obviously like infamously like massively improvised. We've talked about that on a previous episode where like we say like why Frozen 2 doesn't work quite as well as this one.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and it's very. I mean, Jennifer Lee got to be the head of Disney Animation because of her work on the first 2 Frozens, and now I don't. I mean, I would assume because of the lack of success that they've had, that's why she's not in charge anymore. But they created. It's like, oh, you're going to go direct the next 2 Frozen movies instead. So it's like a demotion without a demotion, I guess.
yeah, like
I mean, but clearly Frozen 3 and 4 are really still. I mean, they're still really important. So maybe in some ways, it's actually a better position for her to be in.
yeah, I think it's probably one of those things where like, do you maybe regret stepping away from this stuff? Because obviously, like her director credits are only Frozen. Obviously, she's written Wish, she worked on Wrinkle in Time, she did the story for Zootopia. Like, she's obviously had creative input on a lot of these things, but I'd also say a lot of these things that she's done have got the kind of the same fundamental problem, and it's yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we need a changing of the guard at Disney, but I feel like we're reaching a point where like we need someone with a really strong creative voice who is not like a Chris Buck, a Jennifer Lee, a Rich Moore, a Don Hall, like these guys who've been kicking it around the company now for 10, 15 years.
And I would say the same thing about Pixar too. I think Pixar
Yeah.
desperately needs they need to get away from Pete Docter.
I mean, but that's the thing is like you read that Inside Out 2 article and everyone on it is going like, Pete's a genius. But the thing, he's running an animation studio, and every single time he comes into some of these things, he's able to solve the problem that we've got like really, really quickly. But he's not at that creative level anymore. He's been promoted to running a company, and in some ways, for as shitty a person as he was, and for how uncomfortable he made people feel, John Lasseter, you didn't feel the creative loss with him moving on that step to running Pixar full time in the same way that you do with Doctor and whatnot.
I mean, wasn't John Lasseter in charge when Frozen? Wasn't he in charge of?
He was in charge of all of Disney animation, and then obviously he was through this era, and then they've obviously hired from within Disney now to kind of like replace Lasseter in general.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they need to go outside. Maybe they need to go outside the box too. That certainly may be possible.
But then you look at Sony and they're like, it feels like they're ramping up to give Lord and Miller, and then Lord and Miller are obviously that exact other end of like they're maybe too creatively involved and they're unable to make decisions and keep on like you have to delay your huge budget acclaimed sequel to your Spider-Verse movie despite saying it was going to be out within 12 months. And
who the hell knows when we're actually going to see it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, the animation world is at this moment, it feels like there's a real sea change about to happen.
Oh yeah, you definitely feel it.
And there's so many creative things going on in the world of animation, but I feel like we're maybe like 1 or 2 years away from a movie kind of like completely blowing up the status quo of all these different companies. Like Disney have not yet done their Spider-Verse, Pixar have not yet done their Spider-Verse. They're still sticking to their like traditional guns, but like DreamWorks is obviously like pushing stuff out there. Sony are obviously pushing stuff out there. I think there's another company that is doing like interesting stuff, but
DreamWorks is in a position where they're like, you know what, we're gonna do Despicable Me, and we're gonna get all this money, and then we're gonna do something else, and it feels like a fair trade at this point. Like, if I think the world is better for Wild Robot being out there, even if we get a fourth Despicable Me movie. Like that is a worthwhile trade to me.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who might have too much creative voice, let's talk about Dwayne.
We're talking about
These
number
transitions
11.
are fantastic. You are underselling how great these are.
I'm not underselling them. You're getting a full-throated emotion every single time I do one of these. Number 11, Moana, Muster and Clements, their final movie with the company. Obviously, they started in the 80s with Great Mouse Detective. They come in, they get to prove what they can do with 3D animation, and now this baby is completely run by The Rock, isn't it? Like The Rock is the owner of the Moana license. He will do whatever he wants with it. This is his home away from home since he can't claim Fast and Furious.
The thing about it is that like the DC thing clearly broke him. Like let's not mince words. That broke him in a way that has just had ramifications for everything. Because like he's doing Moana 2, he's going to be doing the live action Moana at some point. Like he's on the board of TKO and WWE. Like he's broken in a way, and we are all feeling the might of Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
I mean, it's his list of movies coming out soon. I mean, the thing is with Moana, I feel comes out at the exact kind of right time for him, where he's kind of successfully become arguably the biggest movie star in the world through like sheer force of will. Like you look at what he's.
Know why The Rock is the biggest star? Because this is the thing that I think people always forget: is The Rock became one of the biggest stars because he was always part of ensembles and not trying to be the definitive lead. When he's the definitive lead, it doesn't work.
Well, that's the thing. Is like you look at the movies that work well, they are very much. I mean, to be honest, it's just Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious is the thing that gives him that like. Fast 5, Fast 6, Furious 7 is like that 1, 2, 3 step up. Right, you've now fully done it. He's still working with the same like 3 or 4 directors in all these other things, and Moana feels like the first time where he is successful in a movie which is not being led by other people, and is not his cadre of like directors who are at his beck and call. And then a year later he does Jumanji, which again feels like he's fully ascended. He's figured out what he needs to do to kind of like be the lead face of a franchise, whilst also like surrounding himself with creatives and whatnot. And then he completely loses it within like 2 years of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, he was really good in Jumanji, and Jumanji is a really that is a surprisingly good movie.
Yes. And again, that's him. He's kind of like he's on the outs with Vin. He's looking for a new home base for him to call home. He's looking for Jumanji. He's looking for Shazam, Jungle Cruise, and all these other things where he's like what is going to be my franchise? Where can I put my flag to be the thing that I'm going to coast off of? And again, like Moana is the thing that he seems to have finally settled on. Something that in 2016, I don't think anyone would have guessed that. Obviously, Moana was successful in 2016. I feel like in some ways, I don't know which made more money, whether or not it was Moana or if it was Zootopia. Yeah, sorry, no, Zootopia made $1 billion at the box office. Moana made 687. So,
I mean, that's really successful. I mean, that's a really successful year for 2 Disney animated movies.
Exactly, sure. But the thing is, Zootopia is obviously the public favorite because it's a bunch of cuddly animals. But Moana, I feel, has become the critical favorite. It's the what I would feel like people are like more like, yeah, exactly. This is learning the right lessons from Frozen, whilst also being able to forge your own path. It still suffers from the lack of a villain, the fact that you feel the urge.
I think if there's a villain, I think this is probably in our top 10.
Yes, exactly. If there is, I mean, they even.
Can you imagine if The Rock was the villain in this movie? How I think it would be so much better, because I think The Rock is a really good villain.
You get Jermaine Clement, you give him a villain song, which is a thing that like a lot of these musicals have been lacking, is like a full-throated villain song. But because it's not related to the plot whatsoever, it's just a stop along the journey of like Maui's journey and Moana's journey and whatnot. And we haven't talked about Moana at all in this section of Moana, but like
We probably should.
That's the thing. Is like this movie has a fascinating kind of like path to creation. The fact that like Taika Waititi was the first person brought on to write the screenplay for this, but doesn't end up actually being involved with it. But obviously, his involvement is almost definitely what gets Jermaine Clement involved. There's a bunch of other people like Rachel House is involved in this movie and whatnot. Lin-Manuel Miranda kind of like doing his. This is the first time he's worked with Disney, isn't it? On this one.
I believe so,
Yeah.
and we will never, and Disney will never let him go. Pun not intended.
But yeah, like this movie is again, it feels like, oh wow, what could Disney do if they learned the right lessons from this movie? But also because it's the final Oscar and Clements, because it feels like an end of an era in a lot of ways. Like from this point onwards, Disney are doing they do sequels, or they're going to alternate between original concepts that are kind of like straight animated movies, and then we'll do a musical kind of like every other movie and whatnot.
Yes, and we are getting, as we record this, by the time people listen to this, it'll probably be about a month out before Moana 2 comes out. And that was supposed to be a Disney Plus TV series, and they are turning it into a movie, which, I mean, to me, why didn't you just do the movie? Like the Disney Plus thing, I don't know, man. Like it's just a lot of weird choices have been made. I would have just said this movie made $600 million. If you're going to do it, it should just be a sequel movie.
Yeah. But then Zootopia 2 is going to get a proper, like, that's a proper sequel, directed by the directors of the first movie, or one of the directors of the first movie. Like, that's, you look at what's coming up for Disney, and, like, Moana 2 it looks so out of place in terms of, like, who the creative teams behind it are. And maybe it's going to be great, but also, on the other hand, it's probably going to be more like one of those shitty direct DVD animated movies that Disney did in the 90s, which are just 3 episodes of a TV show.
Yeah, that is very much how it's coming across. So that is the first half of our top 20. We are now going to get into our definitive top 10. These objectively, Ben, are the 10 greatest Disney movies of all time. Right?
So, okay, yeah, objectively.
No arguments. There will be no arguments.
I mean, do I have any? Yeah, no, the first one is not in my top 10.
That's pretty perfect. Perfect. The first two, one is not in your top 10, and the other is not in my top
10. Yes. Number 10, we are talking about Bambi, the movie that traumatized a generation.
Can you imagine being a child in 1940 and having to see that? And I can't even imagine those conversations. I mean, I guess kids were probably tougher back then, but man.
I mean, this is another one where like, this movie is 70 minutes long, and it's kind of like just 3 or 4 extended sequences. It's like Bambi is born, Bambi meets some animals, then it's winter, Mum dies, back to the animals, now we're going to fall in love, and it's like, cool, and then we're kind of done. And then you come away from it and go, like, one of the greatest animated movies of all time.
Like, it's pretty amazing. It's just, I mean, the movie looks gorgeous, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for this to have come out in 1940, I mean, my God, like, I can't even imagine the work that just went into it, but it's unbelievable.
I was thinking, like nowadays, all of this would be computer assisted, but like back then, to have the especially animals, where presumably they're doing photo reference or video reference or whatever to draw and animate these things, and it's all hand drawn, and obviously this is the first one which is like. Fantasia has animals, and you can feel a lot of lessons from Fantasia in Bambi. But, like, this is so firmly, there are no humans at all. Even Dumbo has, like, human characters or, like, the hint of human around them. But, like, Bambi is like, no, this is
Bambi is, in fact, anti-human because the one human, quote-unquote, character shoots his mom.
Yep. But yeah,
I mean, this movie is just incredible. Like, it is genuinely, like, it holds up 85 years later. Definitively one of the best Disney movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, but there's also how much more can you say about this movie? Like, they're going to do a remake of Bambi at some point, and you're like,
terrible idea. Might be one of the worst ideas I've ever heard of in my life.
It's going to look like like filmed in the volume. John Favreau's gonna like the technical wizardry of it. It's like, no, I would much rather you go out into fucking nature and try and make this movie like with real animals.
That would actually be entertaining. I don't know if it would be good.
No,
but
absolutely.
It would be entertaining.
Absolutely not going to be good. But yeah, like, how do you discuss Bambi? Like, so many of the first 5 Disney movies are just etched into culture worldwide. They are like things that are like generational, passed down.
Bambi's mom dying is a definitive moment in pop culture. Period.
Yes.
Like any parent that has ever died, it goes back to Bambi in some way.
To the point where like Bambi is based on a book. Do you know anyone who's read Bambi the book?
I did not even know it was a book until you just said
it. I mean, it was a book in Austria, but obviously but that's the thing. That's the beauty of these kind of like these first few movies is that like all of the first movies are based on something, and they had this impeccable ability to find either classic fairy tales or like books that no one's ever really heard of and just completely transmute them into all-time things. Like 101 Dalmatians is based on a book, but I don't think people are like reading 101 Dalmatians anymore. That is firmly something that Disney have fully consumed into a part of their identity. Bambi is another one where like
they have
Bambi.
Yep.
Exactly. Dumbo the Flying Elephant. That is based on a book, but Dumbo is a Disney property. Like unquestionably at this point.
I mean, the design of Bambi is also iconic. I mean, it really is like, and I know, we do have Snow White before this, but like that design of Bambi is pretty much what every animal in Disney, it is based off of Bambi still.
Yeah. Even when you do, I mean, I know it is these first 5 that so much this is based on, but like when Family Guy does a parody of Disney animation, this is when they're pulling to that. When like all of these different things, like there is just you can transition into the look of this movie and you know immediately what they're parodying or what they're in common.
To me that Disney has gone away from that. For a company that is so interested in nostalgia, the fact that they haven't gone back and tried to do this, it's crazy to me.
Even Wish doesn't go back to this. Like they do, like, oh, we're going to do this watercolor art style. It does. It looked awful, and you could, if Wish had been in 2D animation, I think it's probably like at least a star better as a movie. If it was like cell animation.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's. I mean, even if the movie was done as is, if it was 2D, it would have been so much better.
But speaking of just pure athletic feats of animation, number 9 is a movie that is not in your 10, but is like my number 6. It's Fantasia, which I think is potentially pound for pound the best animated movie that Disney have ever done. I think this thing is
in terms gorgeous. You're just talking about in terms of pure animation. You're not
pure animation. Pure animation.
I could see that. I mean, if it was just if we were watching these all on mute, Fantasia would probably be top 5.
I don't think you can do it on mute, because the other thing that makes this so incredible is it's composed to music. Like it's animated to music that pre-existed, not music that's written for the movies. Every single second of Fantasia is some music is underneath it. I think The Sorcerer's Apprentice is the only one that isn't like a piece of music that existed beforehand. Whereas everything else, like Nutcracker Suite, you've got Bach music, you've got Beethoven, you've got like Schubert. Like there's so much stuff crammed into this that they are having to animate to like the second, and they're doing this in 1940. And obviously it's different directors who are taking on different parts, and different elements of it are like more iconic than others. Obviously Sorcerer's Apprentice is like,
I mean, it's definitive. It is just like Bambi's mom being shot. It is a definitive moment in pop culture that probably was most famously parodied in The Simpsons. But I mean, this is again like Mickey in that outfit. And again, I cannot fucking believe we've never had a Mickey. It is insane to me why they have never done a Mickey movie.
Yeah. Like when this exists and whatnot, and like what's the biggest thing that Mickey's probably ever done is like direct DVD shorts and stuff like that, like the occasional video game. Like it's genuine.
All these high-powered executives, and it's like none of them have ever said, you know what, let's do a Mickey Goofy Donald movie. Like, let's do a wacky Mickey Donald Goofy movie.
Especially when like the Goofy movie has like actually attained some level of like Goofy movie really underrated as like an animated movie. It's probably like actually on a quality.
In terms of the Black community, it's like one of the definitive tales of fatherhood. I mean, literally, Atlanta did it. Literally, Atlanta did a fake documentary about the making of the Goofy movie.
And like, there's genuine like someone online did like a little bit about like how the Goofy movie is so good at like changes in perspective and whatnot. But we shouldn't be talking about Goofy movie. We should be talking about Fantasia, which is just like I think this movie, even if you don't like the kind of the structure of the short vignettes and kind of it being more abstract and less narrative,
that's why it's 17. I mean, I think it's incredible. I think it's really good, but it's just this has a ceiling for me.
Yeah. Whereas I'm just watching this and I'm just like completely engrossed the entire time. I mean, I remember this was the Disney movie that my grandmother had on VHS at her house. Like, we had all the narrative ones, whereas if I went to my grandmother's house, this Fantasia was the one, and this was like, oh, okay, I'm trapped in the middle of the mountains in Wales. All I've got to entertain myself is this thing, and I think that kind of like lodged it in my head. It's so much easier when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about Fantasia. I mean, this is definitely more your thing than mine, but I mean, again, as a feat of animation and production, it's incredible.
I mean, there's fun things that Disney keep pulling from. I mean, Chernabog is kind of like a fun recurring villain that Disney do. Is probably like the closest thing that Disney has to like Satan in any of the work of the franchise. So it's quite funny whenever they pull him in for like Disney's House of Mouse, and we'll have like the devil show up at some point and whatnot. But yeah, like I mean,
think about all the Disney movies that have drinking in them, drinking of booze.
Yes. Oh God, this movie rules. I might have to go put Fantasia on after this. But from one movie that's like kind of I wouldn't say the start of a generation, but like definitely kind of like flexing, to one that really did kick off kind of a 10-year uncontested King of Animation streak. 1989's The Little Mermaid.
Down Under, Ben. What about The Rescuers Down Under?
Look, you can include it if you want, but like I'll probably fight you.
I mean, it's objectively within the era of the Renaissance.
I know, but obviously they obviously pivoted so hard after the success of Little Mermaid. Although, to be fair to it, The Lion King is also. We'll get to the Lion King, but The Lion King is the movie that they punished Pocahontas animators by putting them on.
Oh, that's funny. So The Little Mermaid is a movie that should not work, just from a storytelling perspective, and it does, because the songs are unbelievable, and you have the great vocal performances kind of across the board. The animation is gorgeous. I mean, again, you want to talk about canon Disney songs. How many are there in this movie? Probably 3 or 4.
Oh, I mean, Kiss the Girl's incredible. Like Under the Sea. Oh God, yeah. It just there's so. This one is, and obviously so much of this is the Menken Ashman combination, and obviously like Ashman only worked on kind of these 3 movies before he died, but like like the power of all of this. Like, Little Mermaid is really every single person who contributed to the feel of Disney movies is together on this one, and it's almost like this and Aladdin are like the only 2 times where like I feel like the architects of Disney animation, or like Disney animation renaissance, are together for a movie.
Yeah, I mean, again, this movie, I mean, and we saw the live action version. Here's what I'll say about the live action version. This movie is better. I do think Halle Berry does the definitive version of Part of Your World, though. I will say that.
Interesting. I will say that Aquafina and Daveed Diggs do the definitive version of the Scuttlebutt.
Ugh, why would you bring that up? Why?
because it's an incredible song.
It's
That
really
should have
not.
been nominated for an Oscar.
Are you
Um,
serious or not? I can't tell if this is a bit or not.
I rewatch that song so often. It is a
Why?
rite of passage to if we're hanging out and we've had a couple of drinks for me to go, have you been scuttlebutted? And then we put on the scuttlebutt, and then people look at me with horror, and I'm just like, ha, you've had to. I had to go to the cinema to see this. There's
You
2 hours of
to?
movie. There's 2 hours of movie surrounding this thing.
Do you have to see it in theaters? You didn't have to.
I saw it in theaters because I will go see anything. God, that
Animated
movie.
version. It is 1 hour and 25 minutes, and somehow they added 50 minutes and thought that was a better idea.
Yeah, the scuttlebutt. The scuttlebutt is about five of that.
Ugh, almighty.
Oh, I was
The
going to
Little
try and sing it then,
Mermaid.
but I've actually forgotten the lyrics now.
Thank God. Let's talk about another great movie and get away from this.
Okay, bye, Little Mermaid. You're incredible. You kicked off an entire generation of Disney movies, but sadly there are like four more definitive Renaissance movies than you that we will be discussing. Number seven. If we're saying Fantasia is probably like on like a pure artistic level the best animated movie, I think Seven 101 Dalmatians is aesthetically the best looking Disney movie.
It's really neat. I love the aesthetics of the urbanized area. You have an all-time villain, I would say. I mean, Cruella is probably one of the best. I mean, there's a reason they made a movie. I don't think the movie was good, but there's a reason that they did a prequel to Cruella de Vil. You also have the fact that this was kind of the prototype for the live action movies when you had the 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close as well. But in terms of this movie, this is one of my favorites. This might be the first animated Disney movie I saw in theaters because this was obviously a re-release, but I think this is my first one because I don't think it was either this or Beauty and the Beast because I was 4 years old when Little Mermaid came out. I was too young, did not see Rescuers in theaters, but it was either this or Beauty and the Beast that were my first ever Disney movie in theaters.
Yeah, I mean this re-released in 1991, so yeah, it just depends which one I guess came first between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say about this? I love the way that the dogs communicate with one another. I just think it's really well executed. Again, this is a movie that is like under 90 minutes, but it just cuts the fat. It really does a great job of still building the characters and even giving the little baby Dalmatians like specific characters, not all of them, but like every like the hand drawn individual Dalmatians all feel individual and not just copy and paste.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I mean obviously I said aesthetically this thing's incredible. Obviously one of the great things that this movie did is it uses uh xerography to kind of like cut down on expenses. So it's like they're basically like um photocopying individual animation cells to allow them to trace it and change them a little bit to kind of like cut down on the times you're not doing it kind of like freehand and whatnot, and that gives it this like real scratchy like lived in feel to way that this movie looks. And I just
Yeah,
think it's like a warm hug of a movie when you look at this thing. And obviously so many movies after this point and so much of the from this point onwards it's so much easier for them to like pull character design, so that's why you end up with like Little John and Blue basically being the same character because you're using different animation styles from previous movies to kind of do this. But like this one is able to take this technological advancement that they do on the movie and turn it into like a genuine style, and it's just yeah, it looks incredible. Every single thing that like the elements of this movie and its structure will become parts of other movies. Like all the other animals that exist in the world of 101 Dalmatians is so much of like what the Aristocats is about, and the
Oh, I
fact that
love the
you've
richness of that. I mean, again, the Mouse Detective kind of does this too, but like there's a whole world that you feel there is a world underneath the action world, and that's the thing that I appreciate, and I think that's the thing that kind of Pixar has latched onto.
Yeah.
in so many ways, but it's brilliantly done. And I mean, this is my number three, so this is definitively one of my favorite Disney movies, and it is just unbelievable, man. Like, I could not say enough good things about this movie, and it's amazing. This is not a musical, yet somehow we might have another like canon Disney song.
Yes, Cruella de Vil, actually, absolutely incredible song. I mean, isn't that this is the writing of Cruella de Vil is like part of that the Tom
Yes,
Hanks and Emma Thompson like Saving Mr. Banks. Is it? No, it's not Saving Mr. Banks, is it? I'm getting that completely wrong.
it's something Mr. Banks, and I'm not. I don't want to look it up, but
No, but I swear like
actually,
they do. Well, I know obviously it's making Mary Poppins, but I swear it's like I'm probably completely off base on this. I've not actually seen Saving Mr. Banks. I've only seen like the bits where they're like doing music together, and it's Schwartzman. Ugh.
yes.
Anyway, but 101 Dalmatians, wonderful, wonderful movie. Absolutely, like kind of in an era that's about to become kind of like more hit and miss for Disney. This feels like a final breath of like this is the true work of collaboration that they've got going on at the company. But let's move on to my number two, and to your final movie that's just outside of the top 10. Number six, Pinocchio, a movie which has never been remade after this point. No one else has got any takes on what to do with the Pinocchio movie.
Benjamin. There's three Pinocchio movies that came out in 1 year.
What do you mean?
Well, Guillermo del Toro did a good version. This one's still better. I want to be clear. Like, I really like Guillermo del Toro's vision of this movie. It's very different, much darker. I really like it. I think this is still the definitive version. I cannot believe that Roberts, like, this is something like, imagine in 1995 if Robert Zemeckis was like, I'm going to remake Pinocchio with Tom Hanks as the lead. Just imagine that, and realize it did happen 20 years later, and it did not turn out well.
No, it didn't. It didn't.
But this movie is like, this movie is really, it's just, I can't believe this movie exists because there's some really disturbing imagery, and Pinocchio and another kid are getting drunk.
Yep. I mean, this movie is Disney doing horror, Disney doing like fun musical sequences. I think the reason why I like this one so much is because like it's so dark, and at the heart of it is it's just like this little family drama. Like
Yes.
there are songs, and again the definitive Disney song is in this movie. This is still to this day like when you see the Disney castle, this is the song from this movie is the one that plays.
I mean,
This
when
is
you
the
were a star is the canon.
Yes.
The canon.
When the movie Wish is literally based along the idea of we make when we make Wish, we're going to be basing this off of the star in Pinocchio, even though we know the star in Pinocchio is the Blue Fairy.
Why couldn't they should have just had Jiminy Cricket and Wish and just.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many things that Wish should have done, but yeah, like that I think that to me is what makes Pinocchio so important. Obviously, there are elements of Wish that are riffing on Snow White. Obviously, there's the characters that look like the Seven Dwarfs in Snow White, but the entire plot of Wish is predicated on it being a homage to Pinocchio, fundamentally. I think this is again like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a incredible start to Disney animation. Pinocchio to me is the thing that defines it as, oh, this is like a true art form that has got legs and sustainability, that can do so many different genres, that can be episodic while also telling like a full narrative story, that can change tones, that can fill all of these different kind of like buckets. And I think it's, to me, this is like the first masterpiece and one of only two masterpieces that Disney have like ever properly done in this world.
I think that's a totally fair assessment. This movie is a little bit lower on my list, but I would almost agree with everything you said in terms of like what it was able to do with genre and kind of elevating animation and pushing it forward. I mean, I think you have two of the most iconic characters from as part of the Disney canon. I mean, Pinocchio himself. I mean, how many times has Pinocchio been referenced? Especially the elongated nose is such a part of so many parodies. And you also have Jiminy Cricket, who kind of almost replaced Mickey seemingly as like the definitive like Disney character. And it's pretty great. This movie is wonderful. And but boy oh boy, that donkey stuff, it's still it'll give you nightmares. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean that is an incredibly powerful sequence that still kind of like is really haunting to this day. Like even if I were to have kids, I would kind of go like, oh, I would love to take them step by step through the Disney canon. But like you get to Pinocchio and go like, oh god, do I really want to subject a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old to this level of horror at this point?
This is what happens when you drink beer: is you turn into a donkey.
Yeah, you drink beer and you smoke, and you will be turned into a donkey. And like the fact that there is no comeuppance, there's no like revisiting of that section. Those kids are just gone to Donkey Land to do whatever.
They're content.
I mean,
But
obviously
Pinocchio, but Ben, Pinocchio became a real boy, and that's all that matters.
he did, and it's incredibly emotionally satisfying. Have you?
Those other kids are losers. Fuck them.
Do you have any experience with the Adventures of Pinocchio book, the Italian uh
I mean, again,
novel?
the only I've seen three different versions of Pinocchio, and this to me is the definitive one.
Oh, absolutely. It's just quite funny that like the Adventures of Pinocchio is like Pinocchio's a little shit who within like the first like 3 or 4 chapters of the book is like lynched for being an annoying little shit by some people. But because he's made
That's
of
why I
wood.
want he's much more interested in exploring that aspect of the character, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, but I mean like the book Pinocchio is obviously like this huge moral Italian moral drama and whatnot, which this movie kind of does a little bit of, but obviously at some point kind of goes like, hey, he's just a nice little kid. He's a nice boy. Should make him
I
a
mean,
real boy by the end of it.
I think you almost have to for the Disney version of this. I think you almost have to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But enough on Pinocchio to the only time that I was not able to create a tiebreaker situation on this list.
Yeah,
So we are moving from from number 6 to number 4 with a tied place, and actually probably two movies that pair beautifully well together. Like we're not going to be jumping between Lion King and Bambi or something like that. We are going between Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Sleeping Beauty, which are both tied here at number 4 on our list, and are probably the two definitive like fairy tale adaptations.
I
Or
would
at
say
least the,
Cinderella.
yeah.
More so than Cinderella. These are the two. I think Sleeping Beauty is actually pretty underrated. Like, I think on the surface, I think it's just a kind of a basic movie, but I mean, I love the animation style. I think it's gorgeous, and I think the movie itself really works. Like, I was surprised. This is the movie that I think surprised me the most when I was doing my list, because I did not expect Sleeping Beauty to even be in my top 20, and it was number 8 on my list. And I just think it works out really well. I think it's a brilliant movie, and I think the icon it's got some iconic imagery that is iconic for a very good reason.
Yeah, I mean it's truly, I mean it's it's obviously about 20 years after they've done Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. It's the first time they've gone back to this kind of girl looking for her prince movie since Cinderella almost 10 years beforehand, but it feels like a real, again, what we're getting to at these points is these um movies that kind of like change the course of animation, and the 1-2 punch of Sleeping Beauty and 101 Dalmatians is kind of incredible. I think this is the first animated movie to be done in uh like it's the first animated screen to do like a particular kind of like widescreen process, but also they're trying to like cut the cost down, but they're cutting the cost in like these really intelligent ways, so you end up with these like the geometric shapes and patterns and colors of like all the plants and the trees and whatnot is just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And you've moved away from the I mean, I Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs obviously looks incredible. It's a far more kind of like stately paced movie than what comes afterwards and whatnot, and it's got a different sound and it's got a different like animation feel to it because they're still trying to get to it. Like so much of it is like tracing video footage of people actually doing the actions and stuff like that, but it gives it this real like lived in feel for so much of this, and they really are these kind of like two pillars of where animation is at and how much it's evolved in 20 years, but both of them still stack up as like two of the greatest animated movies of all time.
Yeah, and I mean Snow White. It's remarkable to me when I look at Disney and Pixar and their very first movies, and so much of their kind of motifs, themes are really realized in their first movies. Like these movies come out and make a statement that these are not just good movies, but that they are kind of statements about the studio itself. And I think that one of the more iconic aspects of Disney is Bambi's mom dying, but to me, like the look and aesthetics of Snow White, like that's something that we continue to see in Disney movies to this day. And I mean, the wacky side characters, you've got the Seven Dwarfs right here. You don't necessarily, it's not a musical per se, but you still have, the Hi Ho song. So you've definitely got that. You've got the fairy tale, you've got the imagery, you've got two all-time. I mean, the villain performances of both Snow White and Sleeping Beauty are really good. And again, I think that might be something we need to get back to. But I mean, it's remarkable to me that Snow White is the first Disney movie, and it is number 4 on my list. It's number 8 on your list. That is real staying power.
Yeah, it doesn't feel obviously like the style of it is so out of sync with kind of like where we're at with animation nowadays, but it's so watchable, and it really has stood the test of time. This, I mean, this is the first feature length animated movie that was kind of ever made, and that is a huge technical achievement for just so much. I mean, obviously, and I think it's also a time where, like, I mean, sound isn't as common in movies at that point.
Right.
Like,
I mean, we are literally 8 years. We are 8 years removed from the first talkie, I guess, of when this movie, or 10 years.
Yeah, just and to think like how many movies were doing anything with color.
Yeah.
At this point, like obviously, Technicolor is existing and it's doing things, but like for the first time, like this must feel like, oh wow, there's none of that. They're having to paint frames. They're having to like do an element of something. Like they're not. They're
And the first thing is like the colors in these movies are kind of ugly, but like just in 1937, like this had to be like ground change. This is the ground is like changing literally from.
But then to just jump ahead 22 years, we get to Sleeping Beauty, which is far also incredibly colorful, but has a far better handle on like what plays well on film and the change of those different things. And like you mentioned Pixar, and kind of like I was just having a look at like what was the difference between Pixar in 95 and Pixar in 2017, like that 22-year change between the two of them. And you go from Toy Story to, if I'm being generous, the movie that came out in 2017 is Coco, and you can feel that shift between Toy Story and Coco in terms of like the amount that they've learned about the form of animation. If I'm being disgenerous, it's Cars 3 is the other movie that Pixar has come out in 2000.
No, we're going with Coco. Be nice, Coco.
Yeah, but that they do feel similar, but also the changes in animation are more seismic between Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, but they're both incredible movies. Like we are coming up on what it's how many years since Sleeping Beauty? We're almost 100 years from.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at 88 or 80, between 85 and 90 years at this point. I mean, it's unbelievable that this movie has stood the test of time.
But now we must put these to rest and really show fully show what our ages are, because our top 3 should be of no surprise to anyone. And really the only question you've got is, what order do we have Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King at this point? Like, again,
the only drama. But I mean, I knew that these were kind of going to be the three, even though one of them is number five, and I knew this would be the top three in some way.
I mean, like we are exactly that age where, like, even though I think we are doing service to those early movies and those like again like 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty, like those movies that come out in this like mid period and whatnot, like these three, this 1, 2, 3 punch of these movies, because like you would say a 1, 2, 3, 4 punch wouldn't you if you included Little Mermaid, but sadly Rescuers Down Under does come out in the middle of the run.
You're so bitter about this.
It fact that it exists, and the fact that they then follow Lion King with Pocahontas, and as I alluded to earlier, Pocahontas was seen as like, oh, this is going to be the one that like changed everything for us, like best picture winner, etc., etc. You're not doing well. You're moving over to the stupid Lion movie that's based on Hamlet.
Whoops.
But let's talk about like the three. So let's leave it as like tension for the audience. So number 3 probably is like that slight step down from these other two, but it's still like a totemic force in what it did to animation. Our number 3 is Aladdin. It's the final movie we'll be discussing from Musker and Clements on this list. Just to give their hat tip to them for kind of like they've come back after Little Mermaid. It's the last movie that Howard Ashman works on. I don't think he writes all of the songs for Aladdin, but obviously so many of these iconic songs are like from his pen and whatnot. It changes the world in terms of being able to cast celebrities to voice characters in these movies, but it also pisses off Robin Williams to an insane degree. The amount of story by credits on this movie is quite frankly insane. I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 people credited with the story of this movie.
Have you heard that Minecraft might have 40 credited people on that?
I mean, you have to assume there are movies nowadays that probably do have this amount of people who worked on the story in those like story generating rooms and whatnot. But this is definitely what the WGA was made for, was to like cut these down to like, no, you get 6, and then maybe a few screenplay credits and whatnot. But like, no, get out of here with this nonsense. I mean, the fact that this movie is obviously Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who would go on to do The Mask of Zorro and Shrek and Pirates of the Caribbean. This is like it's the middle movie between Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, but it is kind of like the all singing, all dancing, everyone who is like contributed to the creation of what a Disney movie is at this point is working on this thing, and it's magical and wonderful and truly stood the test of time. But there's not really much wrong with it.
I want you to think about, all jokes aside, think about how charismatic Will Smith is. Think about how good he is in so many movies. Academy Award winner. Like, this is one of our biggest movie stars, like infamously and famously for some of the things that he's done. Was kind of Mr. 4th of July for a while, and him as the genie doesn't hold a candle to what Robin Williams did. I think that really says it all just about that performance. And I think there is a statement that needs to be made about nominating voiceover performances. I think this is one of the definitive voiceover performances for all time. The genie, just in terms of like animating Robin Williams and this character, it was a perfect marriage. Robin Williams has done other voiceover work. I don't think that it's nearly as good in movies like Ferngully and Robots. Do you remember Robots, Ben?
I do remember Robots. A truly horrifying movie that should be memory hold forever, even though I know people who are like, this is my nostalgia movie. Nostalgia is a disease, and we should stamp it out for future generations.
I think this has a tremendous villain performance. I think Jafar is great. They also cast well as Iago. Jasmine is my favorite Disney princess. Yeah, this movie it rules. I mean, this is like This is the second. This is like the third Disney movie I saw in theaters, and of course, it has stuck with me. What else can you say about Aladdin that hasn't been said a million times before? And I am not looking forward to not just the live action version of this, but the live action sequel that came out. Also, I also want to point out Dan Castellaneta, another iconic voice actor. His work as the genie also does not hold a candle to Robin Williams. So really, what I'm saying is, my thesis is Robin Williams is great.
Truly is. It's a wonderful performance. That, like, the fact that he was like, he knew he was one of the biggest stars on the planet and was like, I do not want you to advertise this movie on me. He has true respect for animation as a genre and doesn't want it to become what Katzenberg basically forces it to become, which is this commodified thing. And instead, this is Aladdin is a bunch of artists working at the peak of their powers, and Ron Williams didn't want to distract from that. He wanted to give them material to work from, and obviously, like, he is the dream. The he'll improvise, and they'll go away and animate stuff for him, and yeah, like, not a bad word to say about this. So I'm gonna throw back to a question, which is, this movie is nominated for 2 original song Academy Awards. It wins for Whole New World, but is also nominated for Friend Like Me. Friend Like Me is written by Howard Ashman in terms of the lyrics. Whole New World is by Tim Rice. Which do you think should have won the Oscar in 1992?
I think Whole New World might be, if not my first, maybe my second or third favorite Disney song. So I think you were hoping that I would give the other answer, but
no. I mean, at this point, Ashman had also won 2 Oscars, and obviously he sadly
in terms of ballads, I mean, this to me is like one of the definitive ballads.
I think I'm just so intrinsically against ballads. Like, if I ever am like one of those ones where, like, I'm looking at like what the nominated songs are, I'm the same on like Beauty and the Beast as well, where I'm like, oh, get Beauty and the Beast out of here. Like, it should be like Be Our Guest, like the fun kind of like singing and dancing number. Because
see, in that case, I would agree with you. I think Be Our Guest should have won.
I mean, it's the same thing with like Lion King, where it's like, Can You Feel the Love Tonight is the movie is the song that wins, not Circle of Life or Hakuna Matata. But which of those 3 songs is probably like more sung?
I would argue Star Song should have won.
Ooh.
Be Prepared should have won.
I mean, Be Prepared also rules. It should be nominated in general and whatnot. But like that's things. These Disney movies win overwhelmingly for the ballads. And it just kind of like, once you want the real fun.
I think if we were talking about other movies and we kind of went through it, in most cases I would probably agree with you. This is the exception, because I think A Whole New World is just so good.
I mean, I do agree. This is probably the best like romance song, like the romance kind of like explosion of the entire Disney animation oeuvre. But yeah, I think that's enough on Aladdin, and let's crown what the number 1 is with this. So I will say, I'm going to preface this by saying both of us had one of the next 2 movies as their number 1 pick.
Yep.
It was just decided by the other person had our number 2 at number 5 and our number 1 at number 3. So,
yep,
like, very close.
It was really, really close. It's kind of remarkable how close it was.
So tragically, I have to say my number 1 movie is the number 2, and your number 1 movie is the number 1.
And I will point out, we did not know each other's lists before we did ours, so I didn't tank Beauty and the Beast just to get Lion King to be number 1.
No, yeah, Beauty and the Beast is our number 2. Lion King is our number 1. Again, I'm gonna say, I think history looks back on it to agree with me, because only one of these movies was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards.
I mean, it was the wrong one, but it's true. Beauty and the Beast was nominated. Here's what I'm going to say. So Brian and I watched the 1993 Academy Awards, where there were
as in the year 1993, or the
I'm
awards?
saying the 1992, because we watched because there were 3 Beauty and the Beast songs performed back to back to back. And it really made me realize, I think Beauty and the Beast might have the best soundtrack of any Disney movie.
Yes. Incredible soundtrack. Like, it absolutely rules.
I like the villain performance. I don't know. To me, the reason this movie is number 5 as opposed to the first 4, and to me, when you get to this point, you're really kind of like nitpicking. The love story isn't super great.
I disagree. I think the reason why I have this at number one is because I think it's so emblematic of what Disney in its history is known for. Obviously, this movie is coming out kind of like almost 55 years into Disney animation. It's a true fairy tale adaptation. It's got the romance. There's some truly incredible like injections of CGI into this. Howard Ashman is obviously like he dies this year. He's obviously written songs for Aladdin that's coming out the next year.
Yep.
At this point, and obviously this is the last movie which is a full Ashman soundtrack. It's got the romance, it's got the comedy. You've got, I mean, Gaston is like all time Disney character. There's probably the best supporting cast for any Disney movie, like, and probably like one of the deepest as well. Like even Lion King, where like you once you get beyond, obviously it's like the lions, and then you add in Timon and Pumbaa, and you add in what's his name?
Scar.
No, outside of the lions, you add in
I mean, you have the
Zazu,
hyenas.
Zazu, and yeah, but I just think like this one, like with Belle and Beast and Gaston and Lumiere and Cogsworth and Potts and Chip and LeFou and the wardrobe and like all the people in the village, and like just that opening number of Belle walking through the village and kind of like going like, boy, everyone here is fucking dumb and I'm the only one who reads books.
She's right though. That was a
Um,
great character. I like Belle. I don't like the romance, but I like Belle as a character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and then just all the other bits and pieces, like the fact that this movie has got like B and C plots of like Belle's dad trying to get her back and them taking him away to an insane asylum.
Yeah, that's where we got to go to some dark place. I also want to say history has also proven Belle correct, because people who read books are smarter than everyone else.
But yeah, I mean, like this to me is like, if I'm trying to summarize what a Disney movie is, like this is like that straight line of like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast. Like that's like the three stops you make, and I kind of go like, this is their evolution from this to this to this, and they kind of like perfect it, and it's almost alchemical by the time you get to Beauty and the Beast. And 1991 is like an insane year for some like of our all-time great movies, and but it's especially like this point of incredible animation as well, because it's also a year where like Only Yesterday comes out in Japan, and it just feels like this is like a staggering monumental piece of work that then, whilst is huge, is fully consumed by The Lion King like 3 years later.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, to me, with the exception of the fairy tale, it feels like The Lion King is the equivalent for me, because you have the talking animals, you have the songs, you have the definitive villain performance. The animation is gorgeous. I mean, literally, the first trailer for The Lion King was just the first 4 minutes. I mean, that is the ultimate mic drop right there, when you can just do the first 4 minutes of a movie and have that be the trailer. Like, I think that says it all about this movie and how good it is. I don't know. To me, the difference between Beauty and the Beast coming out in 1991 and Lion King coming out in 1994, I think has to do as much with the quality of movies, because 1994 was a pretty tough year, I would say. And I don't know, maybe if it wasn't as strong of a year, maybe Lion King also gets nominated. But there's also, of course, the bias that exists against animation that persists to this day. I mean, to me, both of these movies 100% should have been nominated
I
for
mean,
best
yeah.
picture.
If there is a 10 in 1994, you have to imagine it does get in. But
Yeah.
obviously, in the early 90s, the Oscars are kind of on this weird. If you're an actor who makes a movie, we will nominate you for like Best Picture and Best Director. So, like, of course, the five. Do you know?
This
Can
is
you?
how we get Dances with Wolves as
This is
an
how we get
Oscar.
Dancing Wars. But do you know the five of 1994? Obviously, like three are super obvious, and then the other two,
All
I
right.
feel like
Pulp Fiction, Shawshank, and Forrest Gump, right?
yeah, those are the three obvious ones. Like, kind of like, even if I don't think Forrest Gump has stood up, I think they're kind of like uncontestable as like those three were always going to
I
get
mean, just in
nominated.
terms of, it was a cultural phenomenon, and critical one as well.
Yeah. And then you get the other two in the category, as we all remember, Four Weddings and a Funeral, which has like stood the test of time, but does feel weird as like a Best Picture nominee in hindsight.
Yeah, but it feels like that movie would probably, like, if you did the nominations now, it might get in there.
Yeah, and then the last one is, of course, Quiz Show, directed by Robert Redford, who also
which is also a really good movie.
but also gets a Best Director nod. But it is just that thing where like you look at what the Oscars are nominating for,
Yes.
like director and picture, and it's like, oh, we need to give it to Redford, we need to give it to Costner, we need to give it to Gibson. Like there's just this trend of.
Do you think that Bradley Cooper sits up at night and thinks of the fact that he hasn't won an Oscar yet, and he did the same thing that those guys did?
But the Oscars is so completely different at this point, where like that's the thing, is like the addition of all of these other people just means that the actor's body is less powerful. So we don't have insane, stupid things like Kevin Costner beating Martin Scorsese for Best Director in 1990.
Cooper must be still mad though. I mean, he wants it so bad.
I know he does, but it is just that thing where, like, because I watched all the Kevin Costner movies earlier on this year, it is truly insane that, like, in this 80s, 90s run, you have, like, Mel Gibson wins director for Braveheart, and you have Costner winning for Dances with Wolves, and you have Warren Beatty winning for Reds, and Robert Redford winning for Ordinary People, and the amount of times that they're winning over Spielberg, Scorsese, Lynch. Like, these people who have to wait until they can win their Oscar when they finally manage to break through with a Schindler's List or a Departed.
Steven Spielberg's like, I gotta go to a real dark place.
You could have given it to me for Raiders of the Lost Ark, but instead you had to give it to Reds.
Reds is good though.
But is it Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I mean, it's not, but Reds is good. It's still good.
In the same way, like, is Quiz Show Lion King?
I mean, that's the one you would replace. Clearly, you would replace Quiz Show.
But then Quiz Show got a Best Director nomination. Like they chuck Mike Newell out of the Best Director slot. They also very rudely snubbed Frank Darabont for Best Director in that one, and instead we have to give it to Woody Allen. And then obviously the Directors Guild is still doing the Directors Guild.
Woody Allen, he's also not problematic at all.
No, not problematic at all. But like the other one is the Directors Guild and Directors Guild, where they have to get their one foreign language movie in there with Krzysztof Kiełowski with Three Colors Red making it in for director.
Can't do Chungking Express, of course.
No, not at all. I don't think that movie actually released in the US as even a
fair enough
as a qualifying award at this point. But no, anyway, what we're saying is, I think if you rerun either as a 10, or even if you did, like, you do a 20 years later moratorium on Best Picture of 1994, I do think Lion King gets into that 5 now. Like, I don't think Quiz Show does. I Four Weddings, it's questionable whether or not, like, would something like Chungking Express kind of make it in.
I think it still gets in.
I'm now going to look at 1994 movies to see whether or not there's like anything obvious.
I will take this opportunity to plug the fact that Brian and I will be doing our top 10 of 1994 in the month of December. So that'll be very, very interesting. So we'll be talking about Lion King again.
You'll be talking about Lion King again. Will you be talking about such classics as Speed?
Speed, we talked about Speed earlier on this year. Speed may be on our list.
There are
1994 movies. I need to watch Heavenly Creatures. I need to rewatch Four Weddings and a Funeral. I have not seen that movie in quite some time. So I will definitely be diving into 1994 a little bit more, because we will be doing our top 10 list.
I know 3 movies that are definitely making it, though.
Which ones?
The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and Ace Ventura.
No.
No? But you guys covered those recently, and it felt like you had nothing but positive things to say about them.
We did not. We were not fans of those movies. I would say The Mask is probably the one that holds up the best. I don't know what that says.
Not good things.
It's weird. So Brian is usually not the person that hates a movie. It really felt like he hated Dumb and Dumber in a way that surprised me. Anyway, The Light is amazing, and I'm going to tell you why. I think Be Prepared is an all-time great song. I think that they're just the collection of songs. I don't know if they're as good as Beauty and the Beast, but I think they're all still consistently very good. And I think you've got great performances. I think, again, Circle of Life is an iconic song in its own right. And great. I mean, obviously they're borrowing heavily from Hamlet, and I almost said Hamilton, which no, don't sing the song from The Little Mermaid, Ben. Don't do it. Lion King is great though, and look, I think that I would be very curious to know what Gen Z thinks of the Lion King. Like, is Frozen going to be like if we had two 18-year-olds on and they watched all 62, where would the Lion King be ranked? But I mean, for me, this is my definitive favorite Disney movie of all time. And again, I love Aladdin, I love Beauty and the Beast, I love Snow White, but this to me is the best of those Disney Renaissance movies.
Yeah, good movie. Like, I can't really there's not really much to say.
Real hot take.
I mean, we must say though, like, obviously, if we did this list involving the live action remakes, the Lion King live action remake would actually be number one.
It would not.
But like that, never before has a more needed movie existed.
I don't think so. Here's the thing: I don't know if the Lion King live action is the worst, but it's the one that made me the angriest.
It's the most pointless one of all of them. Like the fact that like they went
away
and said,
"Dust, Ben. What about the traveling dust?"
Look, the thing with the live action in quotation marks Lion King remake is the fact that they did not film anything in live action. They remade.
You are telling me those are not real animals?
They remade an animated movie and made it worse, less expressionistic, less colorful, less enjoyable, less magical, like less across the entire board, and also paid a bunch of celebrities a lot of money to not do much. I
mean, they paid what God only knows what they paid Beyonce.
I mean, she got an entire fucking album out of that as well. So who knows? And she's back for Lion King 2 or Rise of Mufasa or whatever it's going to be called.
Mufasa's Rise or whatever.
At least to me, every single one of the Disney movies that I like, or at least on some level tolerate, does something to argue for its existence. A Mulan or a Dumbo. Like they do things that like add to the legacy. Yeah. Lion King does not do that. Lion King 2 absolutely could. It's doing a new story. It's not remaking Lion King 2. It's not remaking Lion King 1.5.
Maybe that's the fatal mistake. They should have remade Lion King 1.5.
Oh, we do need Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead version of Lion King.
Do you remember when Billy Eichner came out with a movie? It bombed, and we haven't seen him since.
Has he not done anything since?
He has seriously gone into hiding ever since that movie came out and did not do well.
Wow, I watched that a little bit under the influence whilst in Amsterdam. I had a good time. It was interesting. Also going to an Amsterdam cinema.
I can imagine. That is so. Ben, objectively, this is how the 60 Disney movies are ranked, right? Lion King 1, Beauty and the Beast 2, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to run through the entire list? I mean, we can do like a screencast thing.
Again, we've already gone 2 hours as it is.
I'll do the 10 just to kind of like summarize. So number 10, Bambi. Number 9, Fantasia. Number 8, The Little Mermaid. Number 7, 101 Dalmatians. Number 6, Pinocchio. Number 5 and 4 tied. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Sleeping Beauty. Number 3, Aladdin. Number 2, The Lion King. Number 1, Beauty and the Beast.
That is, you might want to switch those top two because Lion King was 1 and Beauty and the Beast was 2.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to rewrite history to let the better movie come out on top.
Wow. Well, we do agree that Chicken Little objectively is the worst.
Yes, Chicken Little is the same number on both of our lists. The most united we were across like 6-7 hours worth of podcasting. This is the first movie.
I'm glad that we did not agree on much on this list, but I'm glad that we were both like, no, this is the worst Disney movie ever.
Yeah. Oh.
All right, Ben, I think we've had a lot of fun playing in the sandbox and talking about kitty stuff. But the next time you are on a podcast here, we are going to be talking about something very different. Are you excited?
I am excited. What are we talking about, Jerome, or do you not want to reveal?
I'm going to reveal it. So, in the month of December, because it is Christmas, what better way to celebrate the Christmas holiday? What better way to bring Benjamin in as a third player than for the movie Eyes Wide Shut?
A true masterpiece. Not my favorite Kubrick, but a very good Kubrick movie.
It is the 25th anniversary of Stanley Kubrick's last movie, and we may do some mini Kubrick rankings, perhaps. And Brian, Benjamin, and I, we will be. It's gonna be a long one because we're gonna really break down Eyes Wide Shut, the good, the bad, the ugly. And Nicole Kidman is celebrating the 25th anniversary by doing another erotic thriller coming out around Christmas.
I can't wait. I don't actually know if I can see Baby Girl before this, but I would like to see Baby Girl before this.
I would too. I mean, I know it's coming. I don't know when it's coming after you. It is coming out on Christmas Day here.
Yeah. I won't be able to go on Christmas Day, most likely. I think they saved those Christmas Day releases in the US for like January 1st or whatever in the UK.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. So that is what we have to look forward to in December. And then Ben, next year we did Disney. What are we going to do next year?
I assume you're angling to do Pixar next year, which is definitely not as an involved a process as this one is, because there's considerably less movies.
It's like half, almost exactly, probably, right? There's got to be like 30 Pixar movies.
I don't think there's even 30 at this point. 1 second. There are 28.
I was close, 28. So
that is more than I thought it was going to be.
Probably do a two-part on that one, but
I think we could do a 3-hour Pixar ranking.
You think we could talk about 28 Pixar movies in 3 hours?
I think we would get through the real dross fairly quickly on a Pixar list.
Yeah, and we again get to talk about a dinosaur movie that may or may not exist.
I mean, it's not to spoil the list, but it's definitely not in my top 5.
I haven't seen it because I'm not convinced it exists.
They call it the good dinosaur, but I would say the boring dinosaur, the not the not very good dinosaur.
Be nice to the dinosaurs.
No, I'm not. I've seen that movie twice for my sins.
What? You've seen it twice?
Seen it twice. I saw it on the 3rd of January 2021 and then the 15th of July 2022. I will not be watching it again.
Why?
Because I hate myself.
Clearly. All right, we've done enough. Ben, is there anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
Absolutely not. I'm not doing anything. I am fully hermited. By the time you hear me next time, I will have gotten married. Is the most exciting thing happening in my life.
I know you're not Jewish, but congratulations.
Thank you.
Give my best to you and yours.
Thank you very much. But yeah, that is the only thing I've got coming up in my life. I'm not writing anything. I'm not doing anything than that. Follow me on Letterboxd, NQOID. By the time this drops, I presume October will be over. So you will get to read 31 horror movie reviews and also my thoughts on a bunch of festival movies that I've gone to see, including things like Hard Truths, Anora, The End. What else am I seeing? Night Bitch. Lots of stuff.
Oh, Night Bitch! I forgot about that movie, but I'm so excited for the rest of the year. What a rest of the year it is going to be for sure.
I know. I don't know if I get to see Brutalist. Brutalist is the one where I'm like, I wish this was playing at the festival I'm going to.
What is Brutalist again?
Brutalist is the new oh god, what's his name? The new movie from Brady Corbett, which has kind of been pegged as like Best Picture hopeful. Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Joe Alwyn.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like absolute rave reviews coming out of like all the festivals at this point in time. Some of it being a little bit maybe over exaggerated, but I'm very intrigued to see just how insane this movie is.
Yes, you can also follow me on Letterboxd as well. I'm doing Spooktober. I'm watching as many horror movies as I can. my schedule is kind of limiting in as far as when I can watch them, but I'm definitely going to some weird places this month of October, and I'm also I am currently, as we speak, at 83 2024 movies. Ben, I don't know how many 2024 movies you've seen, but I feel like this is a race that I actually win.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm at 58, but that's at movies that released in UK cinemas in this year. So you're like way, way, way ahead of me. But
Yeah, I will top 10 for 2024 in January as well.
oh yeah, my top 10 at the moment is actually like all 4.5 star movies. So I'm like actually like, boy, I'm not sure how much more I can fit in. Whether or not like am I going to win this year with like a full on top 20 of like nine out of 10 or better movies?
Yeah, I got 9 out of 10 are 4.5 stars or above. It's definitely picked up as it always does in the fall. But yeah, it's been a good month. September was a really good month, just in terms of these movies. And yeah, we will definitely be coming back for that. So for Ben, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening throughout this entire journey. Go ahead and wish upon a star for us to do more podcasting. Talk to you next time.
Oh well.